So first of all, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you coming to the Best Places to Lead. We're going to be live on Facebook. If you guys want to come over to the Zoom call and ask a question, I invite you to do that. Just so you guys know, if you're first time here, introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from. And second thing is, if you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Maria and Roanne will go ahead and navigate that for me. As we go, if you do have questions, I will stop. I will answer questions. I'll bring you on if you do have questions. And so we try and keep it as informal and as productive for you as we can possibly be. So let's start with this process. So basically, every day in America, there is conflict in every office. And it's estimated that about 2.8 hours are spent every week with people in conflict. And so this is an important issue because it gets us off the road of being super productive. So what does that mean in terms of financial impact? $359 billion to companies. Hours are paid, focused on, and it's on conflict instead of productivity. And so it's a very important topic for us to tackle. And we're going to give you hopefully a good playbook to be successful with it. So My Perfect Resume did a survey of 1,000 Americans, and they talked about what is the main source of conflict in your work. And I thought this was interesting, so I wanted to share it with you. The first one is a lack of teamwork. And so we're not working together creates conflict. Stress about work just as equal 25%. I think specifically because this was a survey from this year, people are looking at having to do more with less, doing it in a remote work environment. And so you don't have the camaraderie of an office environment to do that. And so there are certain dynamics that happen. Rude behavior, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later, the dynamic of how we interact with people. And so whether that's done via text message, whether that's done via phone, via email, via chat, right? We have Teams chat, we have all sorts of different tools at our disposal. And people hide behind, instead of having a productive conversation, maybe they're sending a rude text or a Teams chat in that way, right? So we can all agree that conflict is potentially a place where we can do better as a company, as individuals. And so let's talk a little bit about the foundations of conflict. So when we really look at it, one of my favorite books in this area, if you're looking for books, which I know Matt Kleinrock is always looking for a good read. Matt, if you have not read this one, this is a good one for you or your team, which is Crucial Conversations. So what is a crucial conversation? It's characterized really by three things. It's high stakes, meaning it's important. The second piece is there are opposing positions. I believe something and Craig Beskey believes something else. And we've got to navigate those roads to figure out what's right for the company. And then the third is strong emotions. And so we think about this, it's not just a passing like, whatever, I don't care what the decision is. There is a strong emotion attached to it. And so those are the kind of the cornerstones of how crucial conversations come to be. We're going to use that as a framework as we do this. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, and his name is Mike Bullen. And Mike was the vice president of sales and marketing for one of our companies, Red Tea Homes. And Red Tea is out in Denver. Their CEO, Nathan, has been on this show before. He is building a greener Colorado, super fantastic company. The first time I met Mike Bullen was last year, and he is larger than life. Not only is he a huge man, his personality, his personality arrives 8 minutes before Mike does. And so the first time I met him, we were in a crucial conversation within about 3 minutes because Mike felt like he had come in like a bull in a china shop. He had disrupted things that people didn't like him. He had moved his family from Texas up to Denver, and he was really struggling with what was going on inside the business. And so, in my role of advising companies, getting people to talk, that's a magical thing to try and get people to trust you and talk. And in the span of about 25 minutes, we were able to unpack some of the things that were going on for him in the crucial conversations he was having inside that building. And we were able to chart a roadmap. And so one of the things that we talk about when maybe we miss the mark in doing what we should be doing as human beings, we have to acknowledge that we missed the mark, we have to apologize, and then we have to take action. And it was something that I really admired about Mike in our interaction, because we went from not knowing each other to being vulnerable, to building trust, to taking action and leaving him in a better place. The reason that I tell you this story is that mindset matters. Your approach, where you come, are you coming from a point of frustration that the other side can feel, or are you coming from a place of service? And if you can get that mindset right, your ability to make an impact just increases exponentially. And so I also share this story because we lost Mike on Sunday. He was 51. Mike was going through my leadership course in the spring and was complaining about some back pain, some sciatic nerve. And unfortunately, it was not sciatic nerve, it was cancer. And so Mike passed away within about 3 months. But that interaction has stayed with me, that he was so open, so vulnerable, so focused in on what he could do to make the company better, that it wasn't about him. He could put his ego to the side. We had this meaningful conversation, and I traded text messages with him as he continued to make his way, and went from being in a difficult situation to really making an impact on the organization. And so, tip of the cap to the big boy. We miss him, we love him, but a great person to start the day with, because conflict is normal. I think sometimes we think inside businesses that conflict is not normal. And the reality of it is conflict's totally normal. And the nature is we either go into this survival mode, we're going to fight, or we're going to go flight. So how that happens internally is, are we going to have an argument about it? Am I standing my ground and having an argument? Or am I just going to dismiss it, go away and turn my back and go on my way? So if we just make sure that we understand that conflict's totally normal, then we change the dynamics of what's possible. So why does conflict happen? It's super important, because if you understand why it happens, then we can understand when it's going to happen and how we can change the course personally and our approach. So think about it. We all have different experiences. And if you've been here before, you've heard me say this. No one shows up to work and says, you know what, I really want to suck today. But there's plenty of people that are ineffective. And it's really because us as senior leaders don't create the clarity that we need for all of our people to be successful. And so we have to understand that there's strength in diversity. Very diverse perspectives, different experiences lead to different ideas of how to solve problems. That's perfectly okay. We should celebrate that. We shouldn't run away from it. When you look inside businesses, one of the things that you should be looking at when you're trying to hire is making sure that you have a diverse perspective on your business. If you're hiring only in your image, if you look across your organization and it looks very homogeneous, you are missing opportunities to address the marketplace, because not everyone looks and speaks and talks like me. That's just the reality of it. And so I'm missing a whole market if I only hire in my image. Why do people avoid conflict, right? I think if you raise your hand, tell me if you've ever avoided conflict. And I think every single person in the room should be raising their hand, other than maybe Timmy Gallagher. I don't know. He's very confrontational. He has a tendency to do that, but I think all of us have at times avoided conflict. Why does that happen? Because guess what? There's strong emotions involved in it. This is not just like, hey, I was playing tiddlywinks and, I think you might have cheated. All right, whatever. I mean, these are things that actually matter to you. So there's strong emotions to it. There's hurt feelings. I can't believe that Ashley Cribbs would do that to me. That is just horrible. There's disappointment. Hey, I thought you were going to do this, but you did this other thing, or you didn't do it at all, right? I think if you go back a couple episodes, Winning with Accountability, how to unlock the secret language of high-performing teams, I talked about how to build an accountable organization. That's part of that disappointment. Oh my gosh, we have people that are not doing what they said they were going to do. And discomfort. There's very few people that I've met in my life who are just like really love to have crucial conversations. These are things that you have to learn to do over time. Why? Because you can turn them into something that is uncomfortable into something that's incredibly productive for the organization. What are the benefits of doing it? Why should we actually go through the process of learning how to have good conflict? Because when the conflict is resolved in a healthy way, it builds relationships. We build understanding of one another, we build trust, and hopefully the organization gets to a better spot at the end of the day. That's really what we're looking to get to. How are we doing on the framework? Anyone have any questions on the framework, or that I've missed anything based around your experiences? We're in good shape. Awesome. And I see Michelle Miller made it, which I'm super pumped up about. Michelle, good to see you from Denver. All right. So what does all of this mean, right? This is the Best Places to Lead show. So there are leadership implications that we have. What is the environment that we need to create to be able to make sure that the ground is fertile for us to create an environment for positive, constructive conflict? That's the term that I use for this. And so that's what we're after. So I love this quote. You know, when I was doing research, this is from the Harvard Business Review, a great place to go get information. But effective leadership is like a good marriage. It hinges on how you deal with the tough stuff. It's easy to do the everyday interactions. But when you really look at the highest performing teams, they deal with the tough stuff differently. So it's addressing and resolving conflicts requires enormous mental and emotional strength. It's one of the reasons why it doesn't get dealt with. I just don't have the bandwidth to do it today. I just don't have the guts to do it today. But when you go back to the accountability presentation I did, it all starts with highly accountable organizations address things the first time, every time. You never miss, because as soon as you start slipping, your new normal is the slipping point, and that you normalize behavior that is not acceptable. And so we have to continue to make sure that we focus in on first time, every time, even when it's hard, especially as the leaders. So Zach Mitchell, the best COO that I have ever seen or worked with, he was my sidekick when we ran a construction company that made it to the Inc. 500 twice. One of the first things that he said to me was, "We are winning if our people are talking." And I thought that was one of the most insightful things, right? It's a simple thing, but it was so insightful, because it's easy inside organizations to create us and them. Those people over there, the production team, Bill's team, right? Different than the sales team, different than the administrative team, whatever it might be. And so if our people are talking across the organization, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure we're facilitating conversations across the organization. And as Brene Brown always says, it's hard to hate up close, right? When we are close with people, we have a general understanding. We're able to assume the positive, to say, that's interesting. That's not the way I really see how Bill approaches things. And so it's easy for us to have conversations. So responsibility as a leader, make sure our people are talking across the organization. And we have one goal. I talk a lot about this. It's to build world-class relationships. In everything that we do, if your mindset is always that we are going to build world-class relationships, it changes your approach in how you can approach that relationship. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I have never built a world-class relationship yelling at someone. So you know what I do? I don't yell, because relationships are so important to me. The end outcome of the mission that we're on is so important to me. I don't yell. We just have conversations about behaviors. So we have to create psychological safety. And what does that mean? People have to feel safe mentally to speak their mind, to have conversations, to be in a safe place, to show up authentically as themselves. And so how do we do that? There's a handful of things that we need to make sure that we are very clear on as leaders. These are the ground rules. So if you ever go back to the business acceleration model, which I think is episode 3 or 5, I talk about the foundation of every company. The foundation of every company is your vision, your values, and your resources. So we focus in on the first two, your vision and your values. If we don't know where we're going and we don't create the operating system of your values of how we're going to get there and how we're going to treat each other, then you're lost from the start. So if your company doesn't have values or a vision, then I would invite you to have a hard conversation with your leadership team to say, hey, we have to know where we're going. What is the North Star? What are we aiming for? And so if we can do that, it's super important because it's helpful to everyone of what the norms are. We have to have it as an explicit priority. Listen, this is a place where your psychological safety is important to us. We have seen through COVID, there are all sorts of mental health issues that are starting to surface. People's loneliness, there's so many pieces of that. And so we have to be mindful of that as the leaders. So make it an explicit priority. Facilitate everyone speaking up. One of the things that I see, I don't know if you guys have seen this throughout your career, but it's the people with the loudest voices that get their way. It's not necessarily the people with the best ideas. Sometimes the introvert, the soft-spoken. It's sometimes the bullies in the room, the aggressive people who are always stepping forward. And so we have to make sure that we're hearing everyone across the organization and not just the people who are speaking the loudest. We need to have space for wild ideas. Hint, hint. That's called innovation. It's okay to have crazy ideas. In fact, you should be celebrating them as an organization. And then we layer it up to say, does it fit with our vision? Does it fit with our values? Okay, now we start to make some adjustments. Is that a priority or not? I don't know. We make those decisions. And then we embrace positive conflict. It is perfectly okay if we are aligned on our vision and aligned on our values to have different points of view. You want different points of view, but it's how we handle them. And I'm going to walk you through a framework here in a minute of how you can do that in a really positive, intentional way. So again, shared goals comes back to how clear is the company's vision, values, and objectives. You've heard me talk about this before. We can address behaviors very simply when we attach it to your vision, your values, or your objectives. And so if I say, I'll just use Matt Kleinrock. Hey, Matt, one of our values as a company is we're a professional organization, which means we show up on time every time. And so when you show up 5 minutes late to a meeting, it's unacceptable because we agreed as a company that we're a professional organization. Now that's non-threatening. I've addressed the behavior. I've avoided the conflict, or worse, that I've just let it go and let it build up. So first time, every time. Because we have clarity on these things, we have absolute opportunity to have positive, constructive conflict. Without it, there's no rules in the game, and it's really hard to play a game with no rules. Clarity is kindness. Think about your organization just for a second. I want you to close your eyes just for a second. Do you have clarity across every aspect of your organization? Do all of your people know exactly what to do at all times? Do they know how we allocate resources? Do we know how we tackle problems? Do we know how our order system works and how it spits out purchase orders for the next person to do the next thing? If you don't have clarity across your organization, you are missing the mark in setting people up for success. It's hard to hold people accountable when we haven't had any clarity to it. So I'd love for you just maybe take a note or two of areas, whether in your department or within your company, that you could add more clarity that would be helpful to make the organization go faster and further with less friction. I think that'd be fun for you. Why would we do that? Because clarity has really positive outcomes. It's efficiency, because when values are clear, decisions are easy. I don't have to think about it. I go back a couple slides to Zach Mitchell. He walked into my office one day and he said, dude, I don't know how you do it. You make 300 decisions a day and you don't even blink an eye. And I said, because I know exactly who we are, how we allocate resources, and where we're going. And so for me, it's binary. As things pass through to me, it's a binary thing. It either fits into the North Star in the direction we're going and how we operate as a company, or it doesn't. So I made that really simple for everyone in the organization. It's kindness to do that. Alignment. So when I'm really clear about where we're going, everyone can respond. Of course, that's where we're going. It's when it's the unknown that we start to react. It's like, oh, wait. The example I always give is, I love the beach. I live at the beach. If I told you we were going on a mission, I guarantee it includes the beach. But if you're like Michelle Miller and she's out in Denver and she likes to ski, a big mission for her is going to be, I want to go to the mountains because I want to snowboard. Someone's going to be really disappointed when we get there. And so make sure we have that alignment. And then that decisiveness. One of the things that I see all the time, so organizations generally have values, If you don't have values, again, double down, get your values clear, get your organization's mission statement, vision statement clear. But when we don't have our own values written down, nature abhors a vacuum. And so you know what happens? When you do something and I haven't given consideration, then I start to get into this reactive mode. And I start to let your values become my values. So if you're yelling, and I haven't been really clear that I'm trying to build world-class relationships, therefore I don't yell, guess what happens? I get into a yelling match. And so you have to have clarity to make sure that you have decisiveness. You don't get sucked into the war of words, right? World-class relationships is what we're doing. I talked about this in the accountability presentation, but without clarity, there can be no accountability. You know, I talk to visionary CEOs all the time, and in their mind, everything is clear. Or maybe you're the head of a department. Everything is very clear. Guess what? People are not mind readers. We have to clearly articulate what it is that we want to see. Here's how we move things from production to shipping to display to breakdown back to the factory. Right? That should be 100% clear throughout the whole organization. And the 4 questions you always have to answer is, what exactly needs to be done? Pretty simple. By when? And we want to be super specific. By when is today, Thursday, July 14th, by 4 p.m. Eastern time. There is no wiggle room, right? So that's binary. Who's doing it? All right, we're clear. Michelle Miller has it. And we know it's shared, right? Everyone knows that Miller has it. So we want to make sure that we have these things teed up. Has anyone been in an organization with big egos? I have. It is a hard, hard place to be. If you want another book, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday is one of my favorites. And when big egos enter the room, it's not about the company. It's not about the alignment of the vision and the values, the agreement that we have. It's about me and how it impacts me. And that's a problem. That creates that disjoint, that friction. And so ego is always the enemy. When you're hiring people, check for ego. It is a toxic, toxic place when you have big egos. So I have been writing job descriptions since I've been 22 or 23. And the last line of every job description I have ever written is to do anything at any time to ensure the company's success. So very broad, but very clear. So again, I ran a construction company that went from 7 million to 13 million to 28 million to 30 million. We were out of control. There were times when I had to ask people to do things that were not in their job description, not in their role, because it was good for the company. And I would say, hey, Craig, I need your help. I need you to fulfill this role. It's a temporary assignment. I'm going to backfill. But anyone who says that's not my job, at least in any company that I run, they're right, because they don't have a job. Because this line right here gives that whole latitude to say, we are all responsible to do anything at any time to ensure the company's success. It is a brilliant catch-all. So here's the end result. Here's what we're looking to create as leaders. Here's what our responsibility is as a leader. Positive constructive conflict occurs when there's a healthy dialogue, absent of threat. My job is not on the line. None of those things. In harmony with the company's approach, your values. Here's how we do this. Be hard on the problems and soft on the people. I've come up with more dumb ideas than I think anyone else in the whole world. I've also come up with a handful of really good ones. And so that's who I am. And I'm okay with that. I'm going to lean into that. But if people called me stupid and dumb, guess what's going to happen? Guess who's going to stop generating ideas? This guy who comes up with maybe once a decade a decent idea. But that's okay. So we need to be really focused in on hard on the problem, soft on the people. How do we do setting that up? How are we doing inside our organization, setting that framework up to make sure that there's psychological safety so that people can actually have conversations that are meaningful and productive? I love this. Derek, good to see you. Derek's tuning in from Australia. Ego, pride, and self-importance is the enemy of positive conflict. I totally agree with you, Derek. Totally agree with you. If you haven't seen his episode, I would tell you, stop by and watch his episode, because he was shot 14 times in 5 seconds and survived. They couldn't get him out for 3 hours. Special tactics in Australia. Amazing story, an amazing framework to create some grit and resilience inside of you. All right, so I'm going to talk about the tactical implications, right? How do we physically do this? So what I'm trying to posture for you is, what if we reimagine the idea of conflict? It's the same process that I said when we're reimagining the idea of accountability. Accountability has this negative connotation. It's the slap on the hand. It's the finding the blame. That's not what accountability is. Accountability is simply the path to winning. And I like to win a lot. I like to win a lot. I'm very competitive. I'm willing to do the work. Conflict is the same thing. We are all banging on the tires to make sure that we are getting down the road to make sure that we have the best ideas in the marketplace. And that's what we're after. So if we reimagine conflict as learning, as progress, as innovation, that it's non-threatening, and if we get into this space where we think, oh my God, why the hell would Derek say that? If we re-ask the question, would a rational, well-intended coworker do this? Suddenly you change the rules and the mindset, because it's like anything. Assume the positive, and it changes the dynamic of how you can have that interaction, because we want to reduce the stress and elevate our mind, because we're going to talk really specifically about that here. So Bo, I don't know exactly how to say his last name, Sal. He is the world debate champion. He has 2 frameworks that I'm going to give you. And I wouldn't want to argue with this guy, because I've heard him speak a number of times, and it's amazing. So let's just start here. Is the conflict warranted? Is it even real? How many of you have written a story that hasn't actually happened? I know I have. I know I have looked and thought, what did Beskey mean when he said that? And then I took it and wrote the story that he didn't mean at all. That's not what it was about at all. And so we have to be really specific. Is this real or is it perceived? The second question you want to ask is it even important to the company? Is this something that I should be jumping up and down about? Because if it's not important, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. The third is it specific to be solved? I don't know about you guys inside companies, but I get to see a lot of them. And I see this one little specific thing that gets blown up into this is happening everywhere. Global statements induce anxiety because you can't do anything about it. Specific things, I can tackle that. I can understand that. There's an actionable thing behind that. And so, is this someone that just is making a global statement? Get them to be real specific that we can actually tackle it. And again, is it aligned to the company or is it the person's ego? Are they asking, how does this positively impact the company? Or are they asking the question, this negatively impacts my perception and how I'm viewed, right? They've missed the mark when they do that. The second one, the debate framework. If you were going to take notes, I would tell you, these are the 4 things you should be writing down because it's a great framework to go into any specific conversation that you're going to have. So the first is, what is it that I'm stating? What is the thing that I'm talking about? What's the claim or the hypothesis? So start there. Then I have to say, okay, here's the thing that I see. The second part of the framework is, why is it true? Don't let people just spout things off without any type of facts, research, understanding of it. Do some research. We're talking about the company's resources. We need to be good stewards of them. When has it happened before? Is this a one-off situation or this happens all the time? Well, give me all the times because I have anxiety when people talk in global terms. So we give stories to really illustrate it and make it come to life, being very specific. And then the fourth, again, tie it back to why is this important to the company? Imagine if people use this framework to make decisions inside your company. Last week, Megan Bowen from Refine Labs, she talked specifically about this. Someone asked, hey, if you're working for a visionary leader, how is it that you slow them down and make sure that they vet their ideas? And she gave a great example, like, well, we make sure that there's a business case for it. We actually do a feasibility analysis. And it's all about, hey, are we using the resources of the company as effectively as possible? And so this is a great framework to use when you go in to have crucial conversations. This is the place where most people miss. Is there clarity on the ground rules? So do we have the vision, values, and objectives to grab and to use in the discussion? Because if you do not have that, if you don't have what the shared ground rules are, then you have to get to a place of setting them. I'm here to talk to you today because you owe me money. We have a contract and we have an agreement. You are significantly behind in honoring that commitment. You've told me a number of times that you're going to pay me. You haven't done that. And so I'm coming here today to get resolution on when I can expect payment from you. See how that sets the ground rules? That's why we're here today. And you can do that in a really positive, constructive way. Doesn't have to be, you idiot, you haven't paid me for 6 months and you told me that you were going to pay me and you told me 3 weeks ago you were going to pay me. And suddenly that spiral goes down, right? Remember Mike Bullen, mindset matters. Your approach matters. Are you coming at it in service or in frustration? Because it makes a difference. So make sure you set the ground rules. There are 3 types of conflict. Pretty simple, right? There's task conflict, like who's doing what when, what are the outcomes, what are the agreed upon outcomes? We can disagree on the approach. There's interpersonal conflict, like, oh my God, I can't believe Kevin Bree is working with me on this project. I just can't stand that guy, right? That becomes really, really hard going into a project. The third is process conflict. We're trying to decide like what tools to use, how we're going to do it, what meetings we're going to have. When you really look at this, I think this was another Harvard Business Review article, task conflict, the highest performing teams had task conflict. All they were trying to do was figure out who was best suited to do the best thing. Makes sense to me, right? So if we focus in on those three things, again, approach matters. I don't know if you guys have been inside organizations where people just like to argue. I don't know that there's anything less productive or more annoying than people who are arguing to try and just be right. And they're not thinking about the organization and the organization's goals and how we're going to get there. And so call that out, bring them back to this. How does this relate to us being able to be this amazing company and achieve our North Star? Have those conversations. You can do it in a very calm way. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's the behavior. Here's the specific incident. And here's why it doesn't stack up with our rules of how we engage with people, right? That's what you're thinking about. 5 tips to manage conflict. Super important. The first one is notice when a conversation turns crucial. Are you in that fight mode or are you in flight mode? I will tell you, for me, I know when I'm headed to a crucial conversation because 2 fingers below my belly button and about 1.5 inches back, I get this pitting feel in my stomach. There is a physical representation of a crucial conflict coming, and I can feel it in my body. So look for some type of physical cue on you. Use your best skills. I always say Mother Nature got it wrong about how hard we have to work out to burn off 1 chocolate chip cookie. It's just not fair. We got to work out an hour to eat 1 chocolate chip cookie. It's the same thing when it comes to conflict, because the brain dumps chemicals in there and we get dumber instead of smarter. When we need our brain the most, it's least useful to us. That is so backwards. I think Mother Nature got that one wrong. So here's what we have to do. We have to pay attention to the fact that we are in a situation that's turning crucial, and that I'm going to use my best skills, not my worst ones. I'm not going to go to the saboteur. I'm going to go to the sage stuff. I'm going to be thinking really smart. I'm going to ask good questions. I'm going to be listening, because those are the things that work really well in conflict. I'm going to keep it here on the level. I'm not going to escalate it. Call a timeout. Sometimes people, when they get engaged, they forget, like, hey, you know what, Summerlin, I just need a minute. I'm going to step away for a minute. And can we do this in 10, 15 minutes? There's no reason for us not to take a step away, because when that brain dump happens, all those chemicals go into your brain, that fight or flight, it takes about 10 minutes for it to wear off. So you want to take yourself into a new space. I typically go to the bathroom, right? Easy to like hide out in there, do some breathing exercises, get myself back to center, right? And then I come back and we'll re-engage in that conversation. So pay attention to those things and use time in your favor. And if it's really, really hard, then you say, you know what? Hey, Derek, this is a really important conversation to me, but I really want to sleep on this. Can we revisit this tomorrow? When are you opening your calendar tomorrow? You don't want to leave it wide open, right? We want to close the loop as quickly as we can. Otherwise, we get weighed down with all this baloney, right? And so set the appointment for the next day. Hey, can we get together at 10 a.m.? I do want to revisit this with you. One of my morning intentions that I say every day is to live in wonder, not in judgment. I don't believe I have all the right answers. I have to be open to being wrong. And so when we start to have crucial conversations, instead of getting dug in on a position, here's what I believe, and this is the only right answer, I have to live in wonder, not in judgment. Huh, that's interesting. Bill Holmes, tell me more about that. That's interesting to me because I've never thought about it that way. And when you have that openness and we're trying to come up with solutions instead of maintaining my position, the flag that I put in the ground, you change the dynamic of what's possible, because maybe it's some of Bill Holmes's idea, and maybe it's some of mine, and maybe it's some of Kevin Bree's, even though I don't like Kevin very much, but we'll include him in and get him on part of that idea. But if we do that, you open yourself up to a world of possibilities. Instead of trying to be right, you're trying to do what's right for the company. That is a massive mindset change. Remember, the whole purpose at the end of conflict is to elevate the relationship. Raise your hand if you've ever had a really hard conversation and left it and thought, you know what? I thought Waylon was really hard, but man, now that I just had that interaction with him, he is really smart. I'm so glad he's on my team. There is an amazing opportunity when handled right to use that positive constructive conflict to move your relationships, to elevate them so that we can make better decisions and be more committed to the action. And that's what we're after. That's what we're after. Sometimes inside your leadership team specifically, there's going to be someone who feels really strongly about something. And I use this with the owner of the construction company. By the way, I see Zach Mitchell joined us. Good to see you, Zach. And Marty and I, we debated a lot of things a lot, along with Zach. And there were only a handful of times where he would say to me, you know what, Mac, I feel really strongly about this. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. Because when you have trust, you can make faster, better decisions. When some person that you trust on your leadership team says, I feel really strongly about that, then that's the one that we go with. You have to say, it's okay, let's push forward there. Because it's not about me. I have a level of trust. If Zach had said to me, hey, buddy, I hear you, I hear your points, but I feel strongly about this. Zach's track record is, I trust him. He makes good decisions. He sees something that I don't, and he feels strongly about it. Okay, I'm in. Media matters. We live in a world now that's so digital. Sometimes we hide behind some of these things instead of having conversations with people. I wonder about my 5-year-old and 10-year-old about how they will handle communications in the future, because they are very much growing up in a digital world. And so I want to give you like a roadmap here of when you should be using what channel, because we get this wrong all the time. I have certain people in my life, clients of mine, who like to send emails when they should either pick up the phone or have a face-to-face conversation. And what the missing piece there is when we're sending an email or we're sending a text message, it should just be informational. Just information. I'm just conveying information. And don't expect it to be timely. Like, my phone's here somewhere. I have it on focus mode. I'm not getting text messages. And so I'm not going to see a text message for an hour and a half. So if you needed an answer from me, you're not getting it. It's just the way it is. So text is informational, not timely. Email is informational, not timely. I'm just sending you the information. You respond when you need to, or not at all. You pick up the phone and you call someone when something is complex and it's going to require additional questions. You know, I look at some of these emails and they're like 30 deep because the questions keep on going back and forth. It's like, dude, get up from your desk or pick up the phone and call someone. Don't keep on like pinging these things back and forth. It is a total waste of your time because obviously there's a level of complexity that requires additional clarity. And then when it gets really high and the stakes are really, emotional, you have to go in person. Now, obviously we've come through COVID where we've gone remote and, we have CEOs of companies firing 500 people at a time over a Zoom call. It's a new world that we're living in. But if you have your chance, you do it in person. Just like you don't break up with your girlfriend over text message. It's not the right channel of communication. So in person is the most complex, the most emotional, and it's going to require additional questions. If you get these things wrong, who's ever read a text message and gone, what? and then you sent something back and they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, but you said this. It's like, yeah, that's not what I meant. Every single one of us has done that, right? My wife and I try and use assume the positive. If you ever read a text message and you go like, what? Read it again and then think, what? Like, assume the positive. What was she really saying here? And it's helpful. Creates less arguments for sure. Whew, 50 minutes. That's what I got for you. What questions do we have?
Jerry, I have one. This has been very great content, very focused internally within our own companies. How much of this do you think applies, or what changes when you think about external conflict with customers, business partners, in situations like that?
Yep. So remember the slide where I said, if we don't have vision, values, and objectives to lean on, then we have to set the rules of the game. That's specifically where you're going outside the organization. So we have to be really clear about the problem that we're trying to solve and why there's friction on it. So why are we having this conversation? You contextualize that for them. You may not realize, but when you do this, it creates a whole host of other problems. And I just want to walk you through that. Because again, when you go back to the original frameworks, would a rational person acting in best interest do something like this? And when it's like, nah, they wouldn't. All right, I'm missing something. Let's sync that up. And again, if you're back in the mode of service and you're trying to get them to a better place, not only internally, but externally to serve them, as opposed to conveying frustration, like, hey, dude, like, Waylon, I don't know if you know this, but it's kind of causes all sorts of headaches over here. That's a very different approach than that one that comes from service. And so the most important thing that you can do going into that is set the ground rules. Here's the problem. Here's why it's important. Do you have a specific, for instance, for me?
Sorry, not in particular. It's just more general, or maybe not one that I want to necessarily get into at the moment.
Fair enough. You can hit me up personally if you'd like some feedback or some coaching.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jerry, I got one for you, Jerry.
Oh, do it. I knew it. Climb up. I can always count on you for a question.
I know you always like my questions. The first thing I want to say is the last two, the one the accountability. If you hear my baby crying, it's newborn.
That's called life.
Yeah. The accountability presentation and then this one, in my opinion, are just two of the most vital things when it comes to like organizational success. And I just want to give you a pat on the back because I think they're tremendous. I mean, I've been scribbling notes the entire time. I mean, I've been running a business for 7-8 years now, digging it out of the dirt, anywhere from 3 employees to 24. It is so hard. And this stuff is not only for leaders. I believe the stuff that you're teaching these last 2 times, these ones, is such emotional intelligence for anybody inside of an organization, which is why I'm going to have you come and teach it to my organization, because I think it's vital and it's things that everybody needs to know. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
My question for you is, in these 2 frameworks about conflict, the person that's like the world debater, I love these 2 things, right? One is real or perceived, important to the company, specific to be solved or aligned. But then the other side is it a claim or hypothesis? Why is it true, right? Those 2 frameworks, they're very similar. Just 2 different ways of, if you have something, asking yourself these questions before you approach it. Or is it 2 totally different ones that you use hand in hand?
So one is trying to assess as I go into this, hey, am I making this up? Like, that's the first framework that he gives you, is like, am I making this up? Am I writing this story? Is this something that I should even be concerned about, right? And the second is the roadmap by which you should be having conversations inside your organization when we're talking about allocating resources on opportunities. Because I should be making the case, because we have finite resources. We don't have, elastic, unlimited resources. We can only do certain things in a quarter. And so we look and say, what's the outcome of this? So what's the claim or the hypothesis? Hey, if we work on this new production system, I think we can grow capacity by 25%. Well, then I have to back that up. Why do I think it's 25%? I'm just like not pulling numbers out of the air, because we're going to make a decision on how we're going to do that. And so you have to come prepared. There's so many companies, Matt, that make, off the cuff decisions. They chase the shiny object for a while. They don't stay focused and disciplined. They're not allocating their resources. And then they wonder, why are we not getting the results that we want? It's like, well, you haven't been good stewards of your resources. So when we're going to have these tactical, hard conversations, then you change the dynamic of how you do that.
I think that's a great answer, because now that I'm looking at them, right, because I wrote them down, and as I'm looking at them, the one is really asking yourself, as you're struggling with something, you're saying to myself, like, is it real, perceived? Like, you kind of go through the steps. But then the second piece is really saying, okay, if I'm going to bring this to someone or someone's, like, I need to have a case. And I think not like you're building a case against somebody or something, but you got to say, hey, like, this is real. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And it's more factual. And I think then that makes things hard to be ignored, right? When you're having those conversations, and it makes it real in a conversation with others. I think it's great.
Yeah, I just come back to, as senior leaders, our job is to be great stewards of resources. That's what our job is. And so we have to make as good a decision as we can. We don't have perfect information. Heck, you never have perfect information. So to like put that out of your mind. But you have to have enough pieces where you're like, oh, the litmus test looks pretty good here. Yes, let's bet on that one. And that's what you do. And so if I have made a determination on the front side that, hey, this is real, I don't really align with it, then what's my point of view? Because God knows, there are plenty of problem identifiers in the world. There are not enough problem solvers. And I was just talking to a client last week, and he said, yeah, my people are complaining. I said, yeah, because you're letting them complain. Because you're allowing them to show up with problems and be problem identifiers without walking to your desk and saying, here are 3 solutions that I have for it. Because they're part of it. You're allowing them off the hook to not have the responsibility to help you solve it. Right? So I don't let problem identifiers in my organization. If Maria sees something and there's an issue, she better say to me, and you know what, I've thought about it. Here are like a couple things I think we can do. Changes the dynamic as you're doing it. Collaboration over conflict. It's another morning intention of mine. I treasure collaboration over conflict, but when conflict is necessary, I will keep it positive and productive. I say it every single day. And so guess what happens? My mind is trained. Collaboration. How can I collaborate? How can I collaborate? Oh, we're in conflict. Positive, constructive. That's what I do. You can train your mind in all of these things. Derek.
I just wanted to pick up on this collaboration of conflict and look at the ego, pride, self-importance when somebody comes to a CEO with a problem. Because generally speaking, as you say, people are well-intentioned. They want the best for the organization. And if you have that framework of collaboration over conflict, somebody comes to you, a lot of people, they go, oh my gosh, you're picking up problems. That's an assault on me because you're saying that I'm not good enough to solve this, rather than going, tell me more about that. That's right. So their ego, their pride, their self-importance get in the way of the conversation. And that comment you made about assume the positive, I've put it in the chat box. I use the comment, make generous assumptions.
Yes,
make generous assumptions about people, because if we make generous assumptions, then we're making the assumption they're trying to help us, and generally they are. Most people come to work, they don't actually want to cause problems. They want to find a resolution to an issue they see, or they want to be as good as they can. It's generally the systems or the resources that get in the way of their success. And as a leader, we need to just be able to enable them to be successful. And if we enable them, they will go forth and they will conquer.
That's right. To that point, Alex Sanfilippo said this early on in one of the episodes. He gave a great episode, but He said, hurting people hurt people. And so when you start with the concept of like, would a rational person do this? And the answer is no, then man, there might be something going on for this person. I have to be super empathetic. And that's that psychological safety that I talked about. I'm going to address this with a really like open heart and service minded. How do I help this person? And I think when you get back, like your approach matters. You keep on coming back. All I want to do is create as much success as I possibly can. No pride of authorship. I don't have to come up with the ideas. I'm happy to participate. But when you get everyone aligned to say, you know what, all I want to do is be great every single day. That's way more fun than being frustrated. I think everyone can agree, like, yeah, that's way more fun. We're aligned. Fantastic. All right, how are we going to solve these things? Because they're all solvable. And you get more people on the board. It's one of the things that, you know, Zach and I, when we ran the construction company, you gave everyone permission around you to say, when you see something, not only do I have permission, it's your responsibility to raise your hand and say, hey, I think we're headed down a wrong path here. You say, oh yeah, you just don't have all the, you know, all the insight that we do. Let me explain that to you. And you help them. But sometimes they're right. People who are closer to the work, the further you go up in the organization, the further you are away from the work. So you have to believe the people at the front lines. Interesting, tell me more. Super important in that aspect.
Hey, Jerry, one more for you.
Sure.
When you said 3 types of conflict, right? This really got me thinking. We're task, interpersonal, and process.
Yep.
So what I have found in our organization is that sometimes when there's conflict, nobody identifies, they're just in conflict. They don't know why.
Yep.
Have you ever had people where they're saying, we're like, for me, when I see this, I want to implement something where people are frustrated or in conflict and say, hey, hold on, time out. Is this a task? Is it interpersonal, or is it process? Because typically what we found is that we've had conflict, and when we really break it down and put all the BS aside, a lot of times it stems from process, lack of it. It stems from, it is a task. We're just arguing over how to do it, or it is interpersonal a little bit. So have you had organizations that basically tell people saying, hey, when you're in conflict, ask yourself this, like make a decision on what you think it is first. When you're frustrated, then go approach the problem. Because I think if you're just saying, hey, it's interpersonal, we'll say, all right, well, this has to be a conversation then. We have to sit and discuss why. But it's task. Okay, let's walk into it knowing that this is about a task and we're debating how to do it. Have you ever had people use it that way?
No, but it's a great way to use it. I mean, at the end of the day, all of these are set up to be tools for you to go like, oh, here's how we can conceptualize it inside our business to be successful. So if that's a piece where you're not recognizing that it's a task or it's interpersonal or it's a process thing, then yeah, like use it like, hey, let's talk about it. Do you think it's this? Do you think it's that? Do you think it's this? And now we're talking about things in the same shared language. Oh yeah, you know what? You're right. We don't have clarity. We haven't created a system or a process of how widget A goes from this place to this place. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's easy. All we have to do is like clarify that so everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I like the clarification of it because I think it's really easy for, obviously you don't want things to be interpersonal. That's kind of the worst kind of conflict, you know?
Tells me you've not hired well.
Possibly, right? And then there's a space as well where sometimes I think if you don't identify that you're like, we've had people arguing and conflicting where they don't even know they're arguing about a process. They're arguing over a process that's not there or is out of their control. And then both people end up handling it the wrong way. But if it's just identified from the beginning, I think it saves a lot of interpersonal issues. And it is asking, is this a task, a solution that we're looking to create? Is it a process that's not there, that's lacking, that we don't know if it's there or not? Or is this really just an interpersonal thing where you don't like somebody, or you don't like the way this was handled, or you don't like the way you were spoken to? I think it's great.
Yeah, and it comes back to when you look at the business acceleration model, it's why the foundation of every company should be your vision, your values, and the resources you have. And so the more clarity you have there from a starting point informs our approach to all the rest of this. But if you don't have it, nature abhors a vacuum. And so strong-willed people trying to create success, you know what they do? They make it up. They do it themselves. And so that's how it works. So we have to give as much clarity across the organization as we can, and keep on repeating yourself, because there's new people that come every day. And the time that you said it last week at the all hands call, someone was on PTO. And so you have to continue to be the broken record. Repeat, 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 repeat. It's that important to do. So.
Jerry, first of all, let's talk to Matt. I put it in the chat, but like when I do my lean training, the instructor was always like, don't blame the people, blame the process. Because once you fix the process, then people will get along. So I totally agree with you, Matt, that you should really be looking for, the process changes. They might not even know that, what they're handing down to the next person is causing that problem, and they just aren't aware. But usually people are willing to adjust to fix those things. Now, Jerry, I had a question for you, kind of going all the way to the back. You're talking about the beginning. You're talking about fight or flight, and the loudest person in the room wins. What are some of the techniques that you like to look to use to get the quiet person to come forward and speak up, or to mute the loud person so that quiet person has a platform to speak from?
Yeah, I think you can always start the meeting with the quietest person. I have historically liked to go to someone who's a little bit more introverted and demure and talk to them. That, like, again, that psychological safety. Hey, Bill, I want you to know that I'm really interested in your perspective. And every time we've talked, man, I'm blown away by your insights. And if you're not sharing them, then we're all missing out on that. And so part of that is just the confidence of bringing them along. And the other is simply, it's like a bully. Sometimes the best thing to do is punch them in the nose. And so if someone is over talking people, then you say, Bill, great feedback today. Let's let Ashley talk, because I haven't heard from him yet, right? And so you have to facilitate that interaction in a kind way. Again, approach matters. If your heart is in a place of service, it changes the dynamic of how that feels when it comes out. So people go like, oh yeah, that's right, we haven't heard from Ashley. Ashley, what do you have to say? Right? And you help facilitate that process. The other thing that I've seen work really, really well, and I got this from Kim Bach, is you have everyone rate the meeting. So if you follow traction, you rate the meeting at the effectiveness at the end of every meeting. But you can talk about, like, how did we do listening to each other? What are our areas for improvement? And once you get people talking, then people say, you know what? Bill talked a little bit too much today. He kind of dominated the meeting. And you know what? I didn't really hear from Ashley. And so I think we need to be more balanced in, how we're giving and taking information as a leadership team. So that's another tool that you can get to self-monitor. And it's just a mechanism that you're using for people to be reflective. Again, no one wants to suck. No one wants to dominate. We all have opportunities, perspectives, insights to share. So just be mindful of them. Our job is always to pull the best out of our people. You do that again and again and again by pouring into them, loving your people, giving them confidence, clarity, all of those things. Suddenly you unlock the next level of performance. And it's pretty cool. All right, friends, 440. I am so grateful for you coming to visit with us. Just a couple things, since we have some new people here, which is we have a private Facebook group over on Facebook, obviously, because it's a private Facebook group, called Best Places to Lead. And we can have conversations about any topic. We put micro content in there. I would be thrilled if you guys came and joined Best Places to Lead on Facebook. The other thing that I'll share with you, because we just set the date, I am going to run the Leadership Gap course, which is designed for leaders to get real clarity so that you can have and be a predictable leader, that you show up consistently day in and day out so that your people know what to expect and you unlock a level of performance that wasn't there previously. And so I'll be getting you more information as we go, but if you're interested, you can send me an email or send Maria an email and we can get you more information on that. But that'll start September 12th, which is a Monday. It's an 8-week course that we do. And again, all we're trying to do is unlock the best. Bill Holmes has actually been through that course, and I think it's pretty good stuff. Craig Beskey has as well. I don't know if, and Zach Mitchell has as well. Damn, we got all these good people in here. So anyway, next week we have Eric Cabral. who has been a CMO at Fortune 500 companies. He's going to be talking about be your brand, right? This whole notion of authenticity. What is your perspective on life? He is one of the nicest people I have ever met. And he has a unique perspective on marketing, what marketing looks like in the world today. And so he will be our guest next week, which will be super fun. And so I hope you guys can join us there. Again, thank you so much for coming. It was great to see y'all.